Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes. Your co-hosts, Jami and Sara Rosette, couldn't be more different. In fact, they're a study in contrasts. However, despite all of their differences, they agree that sharing what they wish they'd known, both the good and the bad, is the key to moving forward. Let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright.
And today we have an interview with Patricia McLinn.
Yes, it's awesome. It's awesome. She talks about a lot of stuff. One of the things I love that she talked about was how she uses Bookbub ads. And she uses kind of low spin Bookbub ads. And that was so interesting to me.
Yeah. Talked a lot about targeting. Very interesting information on that. And she's been traditionally published in indie. And so we talked about kind of pros and cons of that. And we also covered a lot of, she's a pantser. And we talked about if you write, she has a book called If You Don't Write Right. That's not the complete title, but it's like if you don't write like everybody else says you should, how to be okay with that and learn to work with that. So
yeah, that's
really
awesome.
So
it was really good. So what's been going on with you?
Well, I finished my draft of the Christmas book. I'm so happy.
Yes, I know.
I mean, it's a relief to get a draft done. And there's only like one good time of year to bring out a Christmas book. And so I was afraid, I can mentally feel the clock ticking, because it takes about 3 months to do the copy edits and the proofread and the audio. So if I didn't get it done pretty soon, it's going to run out of time. So, but it's all going to be okay now.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just so impressed you got that all lined up.
We'll see. Hopefully it'll all finish coming together. But what about you? What have you been doing?
Well, nothing this week except launch stuff still, just trying to post, trying to still be on top of things. And, but today I'm starting my new book. So we'll see how that goes. The first draft is always the hardest. And
it is for me. I totally
Yeah. So, but this launch has been interesting. It's been fun to, see people's response. And then also, it's taken a little over 10 days for me to start to see page reads start to come in from my other books. So just an FYI to everybody, don't freak out if you don't see page reads in the first, few days like I did. So now I'm seeing the page reads come in. So it's really fun. It's great.
Good.
That's good. It's been a great launch. I'm very happy with it. So
it's hard sometimes because there's delays and you don't really know what's going on.
No. And you never really, if you're in KU, you don't really know because of page read stuff. But right now it seems pretty cool. So I'm excited.
That's good. That's great news.
I know it. So we should probably get on with the interview because it's awesome.
Yep. Sounds good. Today we have Patricia McLinn with us. Hello, Patricia. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing, Sara?
We're doing good.
And Jami.
Yeah, hi. How are you? Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read a short little bio in case people aren't familiar with you, and then we'll get into the questions and talk about Bookbub ads and kind of what you wish you'd known about writing and publishing.
Oh, so many things.
Don't we all have that? Yes. All right. Patricia McLinn is the author of more than 40 novels in the genres of romance, women's fiction, and mystery fiction. So that's a super short bio. Do you want to add anything to that?
It's more than 50 now.
Oh my goodness!
50.
Which tells me I need to go around and update my bio.
So tell us what genres you do write in, though, and how did you get started in writing?
Well, I write romance. I started with publishing in romance, mystery, women's fiction, and nonfiction, and within the romance, I have done mostly contemporary, some historical. A lot of my series tend to be small town or Western, but then I have a series that's Chicago and DC and a fictional European country. And in the mysteries, I have 3 series. One I think of as a traditional series that it's It's not as cozy as a lot of the cozies are now, but it has a core mystery. It's not hard boiled. And then I have a cozier series, and then I have a series to be, which means I have one book out so far. That's a little edgier. In case you can't tell from that, focus might not be one of my strong points. I like the diversity. And how I got started, wow. I don't know how anybody could get started writing without being a reader first.
Right.
And I started reading very early. I have older siblings, and they used to spell to keep secrets from me. So I learned to read, and I learned words as self-defense.
It's a good incentive.
Yeah, absolutely was. And then that introduced me to that, the world of stories. And I thought they just, I don't know. I think I thought they just happened. Because then I found out. So this must have been several years after I started reading. Do you remember the book Misty of Chincoteague?
Uh-huh.
Did you read that, Jami?
I didn't read it, but I read the book. Yeah.
Well, the author Marguerite Henry lived in the town next to mine. And I found that out. And it was like this revelation that real people wrote books. And that first connection that somebody who lived in the town next to me wrote a book that I wrote and loved, and that this was possible. And from that moment on, I wanted to write books.
Oh, that's amazing.
That is great.
That's a great answer.
Yeah. So what was your first big success?
Finishing a book.
That's a huge success.
It true. Well,
yeah. How many people really say that? And it's true.
It is true. Starting one is a huge step, and then learning that you can complete one. And I had started a number of them, and I started at the beginning, and I would write a chapter or a chapter and a half. And I thought I was doing Regency romances. And I'd give them to my sister-in-law, who, as I said, my siblings are older. She babysat for me when I was, kindergarten, something like that. Mm-hmm. So she would read these, and she said, well, what happens next? I said, I don't know. And she got to the point where she said, I'm not reading anything else that you write unless it's finished, because you get me interested in these characters and then you leave them hanging, because I didn't know how to finish. Yeah. I didn't know how to get past chapter and a half.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to get to that point. And then I finished a book, and that led me into, I went to the library to find out more about writing, and the librarian said there's somebody who's going to talk about writing romance, and that was Kathleen Gillis Seidel. So I went to her talk, and that introduced me to the idea of romance, because I had sent my first manuscript out. I did everything wrong. I sent my favorite parts. I did not send a synopsis. I have always hated synopses. And I got, mostly I got ignored, but I had one letter back, and to my great regret, I lost it in a move. But this person wrote back, and it started with, it's clear you know nothing about publishing.
Oh, that's
which was so true. And then she said, you did this, and this wrong. What'd you say? I overplotted for my characters. And she finished it by saying, but you can write. So figure this stuff out.
Oh, wow. That's encouraging.
Yeah. And it was like from, I don't know, Philip Morrow Publishing or something. I mean, it was a publisher that was totally inappropriate. And, it wouldn't happen these days. I just wouldn't. So,
So what was your first big book success? Which book would you say is the one that kind of got you going?
Well, I hesitate to say this because there's a big caveat after, but I will say my first book, which was actually my second complete manuscript, was bought. and it was a Rita finalist and won a bunch of regional awards. I then later had more than my share of rejections in the traditional publishing world. So, but yeah, that first one was quite
great.
Successful.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. And then what do you wish you'd known about writing and craft before you started?
I wish I had known to trust myself and my process more and not listen to other people as much. And that's very difficult because I think when you're starting to write, you want the 3 absolute steps. And isn't it Somerset Maugham who said that there were 3 rules to writing and the trouble was nobody knew what they were?
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's absolutely true. And to how you get the words out and how it comes from you onto the page is part of the magic. And yet there's so much pressure. I am a pantser and or organic writer, as some people prefer to call it. And I write out of order. I don't write chronologically. I'm pretty much a writing instructor's nightmare. And now I'm okay with that. Now I'm, that's the way it is. In fact, I have a nonfiction book called Survival Kit for Writers Who Don't Write Right. Because there is so much pressure on us to, you'd be faster if you outlined. And I have a problem with that because a lot of times when they talk about how long it takes to write with outlining, they are not including the time to outline. So they see the outlining separate and then the writing, where those of us who write organically or by the seat of our pants are doing both at the same time. And so it looks like our writing is longer. We're just doing 2 steps in one. So actually that's more efficient. I hadn't thought of it that way before.
Exactly.
So yeah, I really wish I had learned early. I'll tell you a story. I had gone to I was in the DC area in the Washington Romance Writers, great group, and gone to one of the retreats. And there had been a presentation by somebody with color. I remember the color-coded note cards up on the wall. And this, this emotion was this color and this character was that color. And that way you could visually see what what was happening and what you were missing where. And I was driving back home with a friend. I was driving and I was saying, I can't do that. If this is what you've got to do, I can't do that. I quit. And this friend said, immortal words, Pat, you're an idiot. And she said, you are doing it. At that point, I had 3 published books.
Yeah.
And yet that push to do it a certain way was so strong. And the person who gave the presentation, it worked great for her. And she was absolutely being generous and sharing what worked for her. But the other part of it, that's how you've got to do it, was very strong and is always strong, because I think we're always looking for the answer. And alas, the answer has to come from inside us and hard work.
Yeah.
Yes. And we're trying to replicate. Like if we do something, we want to be able to replicate it and do it again, maybe a little quicker, especially in this day and age when we're trying to write faster. But we just had an interview with Wendy Vela, and she said the same thing, that she's learned not to do it her own way and to not, it's like you kind of have to figure out, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to be okay. I don't have to do it the way we're supposed to do it, in air quotes.
Yeah. And that question of replicating it and doing it faster, I was on a panel once where somebody from the audience asked, well, from your first book to your second book, what did you learn that made the second book easier? And other people were answering. It came down to me. I think I was the last one. And I looked at the person and said, nothing. Nothing. It was harder. It was a different experience. It was a different book. And, some books, and by that time I had several out, I said some books have been easier, but some of them are just stinkers, and you just have to fight your way through and get it out. But I don't think it gets easier. I think it just gets different from book to book. Go ahead, Jamie.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I say that, like I write comedy, and I do wish that I had not used all my good jokes.
Because save some of them. Yeah,
exactly. I wish I'd have spread them out. But it's because I think it gets harder because a lot of our ideas in the beginning are things we've mulled over for a long time.
Yes.
So in some ways they're low hanging fruit. I mean, we've thought about them. They're ideas we've had for a long time. But as you go on, you're having to climb higher in that tree to get better ideas and more refined ideas. And because more, you expect more from yourself. And so that's for me what makes it harder, I think.
The plus side of that is I think we are the best recyclers ever. Mm-hmm. Everything that happens, that we see, that we hear, that we read about, goes into the hopper.
Yeah.
And it just sort of churns there. So what that means is we need to spend a lot more time in bars. So we can
finally.
If only we weren't social distancing.
Yeah, well, there is that. So, but to watch people and to pick up more of that, and more jokes, more interactions between people, all those elements.
Yeah, I agree.
That's very true. So what about marketing? What do you wish you had known about marketing?
For me, first of all, my career is I see it in two parts. The traditional part, I think it was 27 books in 25 years in traditional. And then I started doing indie in 2010, very end of 2010, and totally indie in 2015. So the big thing I would say I learned, there's going to be two things, but the first is that nobody knows anything. Truly, nobody knows anything for sure. And the revelation to me was after all those years in traditional with the agents and editors saying, this is the way it is. You have to do this. You can't succeed doing that. You have to follow these rules, these steps. And then when I got into indie and I saw books doing really well and I couldn't figure out why, and doing not so well and I couldn't figure out why. And I thought
they were wrong.
They knew nothing. They were just really adamant in what they said. And that persuaded the rest of us that they were right, when in fact, and it wasn't their fault. I'm not saying that because it was passed on kind of from generation to generation, but nobody knew anything. Mm-hmm. And in a way that's so cool, because what it means is you can't follow 3 steps and have a bestseller.
No.
You write a story and you put it out there, and then it's the interaction of your story and the readers.
Right.
And what finds readers and what connects with readers, and maybe what doesn't. Yeah. So my number one thing about marketing is nobody knows anything. So that takes a lot of pressure off, and you can sort of experiment and try different things, and it works now, it may not work later, and, be on your way. The other thing that I learned is that I am not my audience. Mm-hmm. And I hear so many writers saying, well, I don't do this, so I won't offer that to my readers. Right. And, if I didn't do anything because I personally didn't like, I wouldn't do much at all, because we're much more hermits than our readers are. And I have to constantly remind myself that I am not the readers. They're much nicer than I am. Bless their hearts. I'm a really tough consumer. So I think that, those are kind of big general things, not probably real helpful to anybody specifically, but I hope people keep those in mind as they think about the specifics.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think the whole, because you don't do it, you assume other people don't do it. It's working off those assumptions. And I do think we have to be careful about that. My daughter, who's in the next room, is 23. And so she's living with us right now. And she says things sometimes, well, it's just this big assumption. So that's why she's not going to pursue it. And I used to do the same thing. I don't do it as much anymore because I'm more mature, but that is kind of an immature way of thinking to assume those things. And I think as we get more mature in our writing and with marketing and with our knowing our audience, we can see, oh yeah, that's not really what happens. But yeah, to just assume something without trying it or at least investigating it is very limiting.
Well, and that is so true, Jami. And I find it in marketing, in the targets that I choose, I am always wrong. I am always wrong. I think, our books are really similar. And, so people who love this author will love my books. I am wrong. And then some author that comes out of left field, and that one really clicked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My latest theory is they don't want to read. If somebody likes a book and I think that's similar to mine, they may not necessarily want to read my book because they already have that author.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's people who read different things but have a gap that I can come in and fill.
Or maybe they've I've read something that's more similar in tone. So now I want something new. Yeah. And they're looking for something different. And I'm like you, I think, this person is a perfect match for me as far as a reader, and then a lot of times those don't do well at all. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, what is wrong here? So it makes me feel better to hear you say that.
Oh, it is 100%. The people who do the best for me, like on Bookbub ads, not the feature deals, but the ads, it's always like, who?
Exactly.
Why? What? Yeah. and then it's like, I love you because I'm getting this great, exposure. And maybe that's part of it too. That I'm saying who because I haven't explored that audience. Mm-hmm. So this author is who turns out to be good is an entry point for me to a new readership. Thank you very much. I love that. And we can do that for each other. Exactly. That's wonderful.
I know. So what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your career, and looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
Well, I think one assumption I made is that I would keep writing no matter what. And that's been pretty close to true. Because my first book was out in 1990.
Wow.
I've been around a long time. If you tell me you weren't born then, you're both dead.
Oh, no.
No danger of that.
I was having babies then, yeah.
So I think another assumption, which was a pretty reasonable assumption when I started, was that things were going to stay the way they were. And I am so thrilled to be wrong about that one, that it's opened up so much. There's so many opportunities. There's so much diversity available. And I really like this publishing world a lot better than the one I entered the business in.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
That's a great answer.
So have you ever made a mistake that turned out to be a good thing?
Yes.
I want to hear about those. Yeah.
I stayed with Harlequin longer than I probably should have, and I kicked myself for it quite a bit. And I will tell you, I might have said this before in my life, but kicking yourself is not a good exercise program. It might be the one I'm best at, but it is not a good exercise program. And then what it turned out is that I got the rights back I asked for rights back with nothing to do with them. There was nowhere to go with them. It was strictly because I wanted them in my hot little hands rather than their hot little hands. Mm-hmm. And those books that I wrote during the period that I subsequently kicked myself for were the ones that got me started in indie.
Oh,
that's
so
wonderful.
if I hadn't stuck with Harlequin, if I hadn't written those books at that time, I wouldn't have had that core, that foundation for my indie career. So
that's great.
Wrong again.
So I know a couple of authors who've started listening to the podcast that they're traditional right now. So tell us a little bit about it. You know, like if someone's interested in like trying to get their rights back, would you recommend just going for it and getting back as much as you can?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's getting tougher and tougher. The contracts are more grabby than they ever were, and they were pretty darn grabby. And so one of the things I would say to people who are entering into contracts now to view it as giving up those rights to that book forever. You know, possibly you can get it back 35 years after it's been published or was sold, through a long, fairly complex process. For people who were published previously, look at your contracts, and I recommend asking whether your contract says it's due for reversion or not. Ask. All they can do is say no. Keep asking. Ask for different reasons. That's a large part of how I got a lot of my books back from Harlequin, although I also have to say it might help that I was instrumental or deeply involved in is a better term. See, I edit my conversation. Deeply involved in the class action lawsuit against Harlequin. So maybe they just wanted to get back away from me.
If you accomplished your goal, though.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure doing business with you, Pat, but we're done.
Thank you very much. It was all worthwhile in that case. Yeah. So they have foreign rights to one book in Germany, Turkey, and Spain, I think. So,
I'm going to tell you right now, when you said 35 years, like my gut just clenched. But I think it's different. Like the entrepreneur in me is like, oh, heck no. But for someone who that's their goal, there's nothing wrong with that if that's your goal. But when it's not your goal, that just seems crazy. But
why, Jami, do you think it's the goal for some people to be traditionally published?
I think it's the validation. I think they a couple of things. I think one, they've seen how much work indie publishing is, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And I don't know that they want to do that. And then second of all, I think people they need that validation, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I wanted that when I started. It's just I was introduced to indie publishing and realized once I got a check, I didn't really need anybody else's validation.
Yeah. Well, and I find that really interesting, though, Jami, because I associate traditional publishing not with validation.
Right, because
much more validation in indie because the readers are the validation. Right. And from the external validation in the traditional world of editors loving your work or, getting the prizes and things like that, maybe the top 1% of traditionally published authors get that, and the other, we'll be really generous and say the top 5%, and the other 95% are getting whacked at all the time at the knees. Oh, you didn't sell enough. Oh, this book didn't do as well as that other one. Oh, and it doesn't matter whether it was a horrible cover over which you had no control. It doesn't. Yeah, been there, done that. Or horrible scheduling over which you had no control. Not only did you have no control, you tried your darndest to get it to work out. Or, as happened to somebody I knew, railroad carload of books got caught in the Rocky Mountains in a snowstorm. And they still got dinged because that book didn't sell well. Well, not in charge of the weather. Couldn't do anything about it.
I get what you're saying. I think there are a lot of people that, because they don't know, like they only think this is the way to go, that they think, oh, well, this is what I should do. And then when I win a contest, because I won a lot of contests, and there's nothing like that. Like there is nothing like winning that contest and having these wonderful comments on a page and you read it. And that is so validating. But you know what? That doesn't make me any money.
No.
And then signing with what I realized was signing with a traditional publisher would not put any money in my pocket either, because I was not going to be their top 5%. I was just a romance author that wrote funny books. I mean,
and one of the reasons I think it's so important, we talk about making money. I think a lot of people, especially those not writing, don't recognize that if we're not making money, we can't keep writing.
Right, exactly.
We have to earn a living. And if you're not earning a living at it, it then becomes a hobby, which does not get the time and attention that writing needs to continue and to produce books.
And I think I was going to say too that I think a lot of people have myths that they believe about traditional publishing that may have been true years ago, but they're not now, or they were never true. And I found that a lot of times if I tell people that even if you're traditionally published, your book is not going to be on the Barnes & Noble bookshelf all the time. It will only be there during the month your book is released, usually, unless you're like a super special person. Mm-hmm. It goes away after that because there's a new set of books coming, and people are just shocked. They just almost can't believe it.
In the early 2000s, there was a statistic from one of the official, maybe it was the ABA or APA, that said the average book is on the shelves in a physical bookstore for 16 days.
Wow.
Average books. So, there are a lot of those that are classics and the big names who are sitting there longer. So there's somebody on the other end who's there a lot shorter time to have that be an average.
Yeah.
And I always hate to sound like I'm bashing traditional publishing because I've never done it. So like, I really have no idea. But for me personally, it was not an avenue I wanted to pursue once I learned some of the things we're talking about here. And I like doing some of the other things. If all you want to do is write, then I guess it's an okay avenue.
It's actually but you still have to do all the marketing the way it is right now, and you have to do a lot of the editing because the editors are not really afforded the time to edit. Right. They're doing other things too. They're doing business things. I did spend a long time in traditional publishing, and I had, as I said, well, let's see, I think I had 24 books with Harlequin, and I had 32 editors.
Wow.
And that was not because I wasn't turning books in on time. In fact, I screwed up their schedule a couple times by being on time. They couldn't cope with that.
Pretty fast, yeah.
The editors often were not treated great either. Yeah. It's a tough business. Somebody is paying for all the overhead of the business, of the structure of the office, of all that stuff going on. Yeah. I think that the other thing about the difference between traditional and indie that I feel really strongly about is because of that overhead, traditional has to, as a business model, look for books that have a wide appeal. So kind of I don't want to say lowest common denominator, right? Widest common denominator.
Right.
They have to look for really wide appeal. In indie, you can make a decent living appealing to satisfying a narrower readership. And I find that very appealing. After all those years in traditional of being told I was pushing the envelope, I'm going, what envelope? Where? I don't see the edges. What are you talking about? And it just never computed for me. And, I don't get that from my readers. I don't think I've ever had a reader write and say, you're pushing the envelope. Right. And the other thing is that, I was told, like in traditional, I never sold poorly enough that they cut me. Mm. And traditional publishing has cut some people who have succeeded fantastically in indie.
Yes.
They've been really wrong. Really, really wrong. But I also never sold well enough in traditional that they left me alone. So it was not a good fit for me at all.
I remember right before I put out my first book, I was at a conference our RWA put on, and I was on the board, and we had these two editors and an agent set up, and we were doing this speed dating thing. Mm-hmm. The girl that was coordinating it, there was a hole in the schedule, and she's like, I know you're going to indie publish, but would you just step in and pitch just so we don't leave them sitting there? And I was like, sure. So I did. Well, it turned out they didn't like that idea, so they had all gathered in one room, and the four of us pitched to these three people, these two editors and agent. So everybody else went, and then I went and I started talking about my book, and they are laughing, and the editors are fighting over it, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm wrong, maybe, because I like the validation. And I mean, it goes on because I'm not stupid. I told about the second book too, because they kept laughing and I kept telling, and when I finished, they were both like, slapping the table, I want this book. And then one of them said, wait, did you say it's a rock star? And I said, yeah. And she was like, rock stars don't sell. You'd have to change that. And I was like, what?
It's like and concept.
The name of the book was Running from a Rock Star. And I said, well, and she's like, yeah, women want like normal men. And I said, running from a mechanic is a training order. So like, I'm not doing this.
I bet you could pull it off, Jami.
No, I mean, it was crazy. And then and the second one, he's a lawyer. Yeah, lawyers don't sell either. Both of them said that. Mm-hmm. And the agent caught me coming out of the bathroom later and said, oh, you need to sign. They're still talking about your book. They want your book. And I was like, they don't want my book. They want a book.
Right.
By somebody that can tell a funny story, but they don't want my book because I'm not changing it. And, that book, both of those books have earned me so much money. I mean, it's just insane. And so I'm like, yeah, rock stars and lawyers, both they sell.
Yes. Yes.
So that's good. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sara.
Oh, I was going to say, that's kind of a theme that traditional publishing doesn't always know what's right. Yeah. And as an indie, we can really focus on those little niches that it wouldn't make sense for a big traditional publisher maybe to market to some of these narrower genres, but we can, and we can have a very nice living doing it.
Yeah, because we can be more nimble and flexible because
right.
And also we feel the heart of our story. Why you understood why that lead character was a rock star, and you understood that it was necessary to the core of the story, and then you can convey that to readers. My first mystery sign off, just the first book in the Caught Dead in Wyoming series, I wrote that and marketed it or sent it out to traditional publishers and had a lot of interest. One editor, very well-respected editor, said she wanted to buy it and she was really interested, and it got the kibosh from the marketing because, and this came back from marketing to the editor to my agent to me. So, I'm quoting fourth hand there, but marketing said they didn't know how to market it because it was just a well-written mystery.
You had no hook.
But I was passionate about it, and it's done fabulous for me. And I love those characters, and thank heavens the readers love them too.
Well,
Because they're normal. I mean, they have issues, which is part of what makes them normal, but they're normal.
Right.
Let's switch gears and talk about marketing to some of these more narrow subgenres. And we especially wanted to ask you about Bookbub ads, because you have a post that we'll link to in the show notes about having like low budget Bookbub ads. So tell us about those. Can you tell us, kind of give us a quick overview of how you your philosophy, kind of how you do them to keep your income steady?
Well, and that's part of the philosophy. My idea is that, especially when you have a catalog of books, if you can take the lowest earning books and nudge them up some, or if you can nudge them all up, that's even better. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot of dollars per day spread across the catalog of books. So that is part of what I do. And a lot of the way I do it is by feeding juice to the different series, because I think it's 6 romance series and the 2 series and the series to be and mystery. So I've got a lot of series to work with, and I will usually do free for the first book, because I like that idea of trying to find the reader-author match and I'm not really good at selling. I'm not good at selling my books. So I'm just trying to go for the match and then have them like the books to keep going through the series. And my goal is to keep some juice to the series, not consistently, but kind of coming back, cycling, maybe a better way of saying it, coming back. So none of those series drops too low. Although as I say that, I'm thinking, ooh, that series and that other series, I better give them a little more juice. And I don't do it on a schedule. It's all, just what hits me. and this one's feeling a little low and that one needs a little more love. And I do it as low cost as I can, because I think a lot of folks advertising try to focus on those big names, on the few big names that they know. And as we talked about earlier, it's the people I've never heard of who do great for me, and they have a readership that we can access. Plus, personal theory here, I think a lot of times a portion of the readership of big names are not people who are looking for new reads and new authors. They are going back to their old reliables, and they are going to read deep into that writer's catalog, but they won't read as widely. And those of us who are not super big names at this point in our careers are looking for readers who want to read widely. So if you look at authors who are not as well known, they're more likely to have readers who read widely. They're people who are willing to take a chance on somebody who's lesser known. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for those people who I go, who? What? And then I also end up looking at their books and buying their books, and it's a great way to find new reads. Mm-hmm. Did that answer the question? I went off on my.
No, yes, it did. It did. And I've just recently had some success with an author that I would have never in a million years guessed would have done well for me, and I've been getting, click-through rates that are unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. But it's kind of, but I've spent more than just that low level, and so this is very interesting. I'm going to look at that, because after a while, after a week or so, that audience kind of peters out, and so I have to. I haven't figured out how to.
And that also is part of, I'm not sure this is marketing theory, Jami. I think this is knowing how I operate. Mm-hmm. I don't want to have to keep creating new ads.
Right.
So I'm looking at making those people last a long time
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
And the other factor is if you're not wiping out their audience, if you're, if you're just sort of, popping along and getting some impressions every day and going along, their audience is going to build.
Mm-hmm.
And so it may be perpetual. You may never have to create another ad. This is my goal in life. I hate to, because I fuss with them. They take so much more time than they should. It's, I did all these confessions in that blog. I couldn't believe they wanted me to do that blog. I kept saying, really? This is not a system. There are not 3 steps. It's a bizarre approach. And they said, yeah, just write what you do. All right.
Bookbub ads are such an interesting animal because Free does great. I don't know that KU does well. I'm in KU, and anytime I've sort of, advertised to that audience, haven't done great. But I will tell you, with these ads that I was running, it was to a full price book, and my sales were through the roof. My
Fabulous.
page went up some, but not to the rate that the sales did. So they were buying a full price book, $4.99 book on a Bookbub ad.
That's terrific.
That lasted for a couple of weeks. I mean, I would change things up a little bit, but for a couple of weeks I was able to do that. So they're just such interesting animals. I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of how they really, we haven't mined all their secrets.
Absolutely not. I think one of the issues, one of the hurdles I see with them is that the romance audience is so bulky.
Mm-hmm.
The contemporary romance, and I have more success with the mysteries because I think it is
maybe more targeted in a way.
Yeah, I can do it. It's not like there's not a just mystery. There, I can do cozy and crime fiction,
Mm-hmm.
and I can mix up some of the authors with some of those categories, and that can help guide to the readers who would be most likely be interested in my books. Whereas with romance, it seems harder to do. There aren't those the areas to mix. I hope that they will add some more categories. I'd love to see small town.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually love to see sweet, or I hate clean and wholesome because my books are not unwholesome, darn it. But because then you could eliminate people by using some of those if they only want to read those. So it needs a little more.
We should provide feedback to Bookbub. We should provide like if several people say, "Hey," because they're very responsive. So
they are very
maybe
responsive
we should
and very interested. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's partly the success of romance on Bookbub that it's gotten so big. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, let's switch gears a little bit again and talk about your podcast. You have a podcast for readers called Authors Love Readers. And how'd you come up with the idea, and tell us about it? Tell us, just your tips for podcasting.
Tips for podcasting. Don't talk twice as long as the show's going to be. That's why we have a lot of compilations, because we never use up everything in one show. The reason I started it was I was actually at a local event in northern Kentucky, and a reader was very excited about meeting the authors and talking. She'd read my work, and we were talking, and she said it was so wonderful to be able to see and listen to the authors and ask a few questions, and she wished she could could hear more and do more. And I thought, I know a lot of authors and I like asking questions. So my thought was to be the designated question asker on behalf of what readers would be interested in. And I solicited questions from readers. So there are a number of the questions in there are directly from readers. And I always ask those. Mine, I don't always ask all of my questions because I have too many questions. But we talk about how we come to the stories, how we came to writing, what inspires us, what throws us for a loop. And so, and the other idea was, the conversations at conferences among writers. It was sort of the idea of opening the door a little bit and let the readers just hear what we talk about.
Right. I love that.
Maybe a little more restrained than we are at the end of a conference, especially. Behaving a little better, but yeah.
That's great.
What we're talking about.
Is it a monthly or are you?
It started as a weekly, so there are about 100 episodes out there.
Oh well.
And then somebody got tired.
I totally understand that. Podcasting is very labor intensive.
It is. And I have an editor and it's still labor intensive, and it takes a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. And to some extent, it takes some of the same energy that writing does. Mm-hmm. Plus, I know that people listening may not totally understand that, but a lot of us are introverts, and that talking and being out there is more energy draining than hiding away in our little room. It's like, during the pandemic and people are talking about, oh, this is so awful. And I'm like, it is.
Nothing's changed, huh?
Yeah, it's my normal.
I hear the words you're saying, I don't understand.
I know.
Because I'm the opposite. I'm That's not funny. The introvert. It actually, when we get off these calls, I'm like full of energy and I'm ready to go.
And Sarah, take a nap.
Me too, Sarah. Yes, yeah. And I know a lot of people think I'm more outgoing. I guess I'm a high functioning introvert.
That's true. That's true. I think a lot of us are. I mean, a lot of people are. My husband is. Yeah. But I'm
well, it's
do you find that not being an introvert, Jami, do you find that you approach things differently, like in your writing or in marketing, from the way your introvert friends do?
Yeah, I have to talk about everything. Like if I don't say it out loud, it's really not true. So in like coming up with story ideas or plotting stories and stuff, I have to actually speak it to someone else. My marketing idea is a little bit the same way. Yeah, it's very much, it has to come out of my mouth or it's not real to me.
That's fascinating, because I find if I talk a story too much, I've told it. Yeah, I'm done with it. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah, no, I have to. As Sarah, I talk about it. In this book I'm writing, it took me, it's been a year since my last release. I don't release fast. And she's had to listen to me for a year. God bless
her. So fun to listen to. It's fun.
Yeah.
And where Jami, in this continuum do you fall, Sarah?
Oh, I'm much more, I have to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. And I do hash things out with Jami and our other friend Danielle. When we meet for lunch, we'll hash out plot ideas and stuff, but I can't talk through everything.
But it's only once she's gotten the idea. So for me to even formulate the idea, I really have to talk it through. Like I talk my way to an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then is it still fun to write it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
See, it's not fun for this. I think it's one of the reasons I don't outline, because I'm a fairly organized, logical person. I'm not necessarily a linear thinker, but I am logical and practical and organized. Mm-hmm. But if I have outlined the story, whatever there is whatever story thing there is in my head goes, okay, we're done with that one. Let's go off and find something new to play with.
That could be a problem.
Yes. And then the writing is just drudgery, Oh God, another word. I'm so sick of the word the, I can't type the word the one more time.
Sarah and I are big Becca Syme
yes.
fans, and she talks about your strengths and her Write Better Faster classes and stuff. And so taking that this year really helped me see that some of the stuff I do is just totally normal for me. And some of the stuff that I've been trying to do because everybody else said you should do it. Yeah, exactly. So when you said that earlier, I was like, oh yeah, totally 100%. Yeah.
But why do we have to learn it painfully before we really accept that, our way is fine. Mm-hmm. And that's, as I said, I wrote that book, A Survival Kit for Writers Who Don't Write Right. And it's part revival meeting and then it's tips, and really, practical stuff. But I gave it initially as a workshop. First time was at RWA National, and Alicia Rasley was the program chair, and she was the first person brave enough to have it, because most program chairs are people who have a certain mindset, because that's the kind of mindset that lets them succeed at being, program chairs. Mm-hmm. And they looked at what I was talking about, I'm sure, and thought nobody on earth could write a book like that. It just can't happen. So this
nobody's going to want to listen to that.
No.
But I bet you have people who are very happy to find it, right?
I had people in tears.
Yeah.
And then I gave it again at RWA in Australia, in Melbourne in 2015. And again, I had people came up to me afterwards with tears in their eyes. And one woman said that she had decided that was going to be her last conference because she couldn't write the way that you were supposed to write. So this was her last shot. And I later got an email from her that she'd completed a manuscript, which she had never done before.
That's awesome.
So that is something I would really want to say to writers, to trust. I always want to learn new things. I always want to try new things, but also to respect your instinct, respect your process, and give it credit for having gotten you to where you are, and then try to improve it a little without throwing out the core that's worked so well for you.
Right. So we will definitely link to that book, because I know people will be looking for it. So
that's great.
It's just been great to talk to you, and you've given us so much information. Do you have something?
Let me say one thing. It's $2.99 on the retailers, but if you go to my website and my ebook store, it's 99 cents there.
Okay.
Because I wanted it available for everybody who needed it, but I'm trying to recoup my expenses.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So we'll link to that. And then, so we just have two more questions. And the first one is, what's the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success?
I truly believe it was fighting my way through to where, I was going to say to where the writing was top. But it always was top. I just struggled more with the consequences of that. And I'm more accepting now of that I'm going to write what I want to read. And then I look for a readership who is interested in reading that. I am the antithesis of writing to market. I've got to entertain me first. We live with the book for months. If somebody else reads it in 3 hours, maybe a little longer than that, but I've got to love it. And I think that truly has set me up for success. First of all, stubbornness has helped too, but in sticking around long enough for good things to happen.
Not giving up.
Yeah. not giving. And that's one of the things when you talked about indie and traditional. In indie, you don't give up on yourself, but people can give up on you in traditional, and you stop having opportunities, and you stop being able to try different things and grow. So yeah, I think I definitely think making the writing, and the flip side of that, Sarah, is making the writing number one, and then when you come to the business, being practical. I'm a great believer in no debt, cushions on top of cushions, save for your retirement. I'm really glad I've had those cushions, because in this pandemic, one of the things I've been able to do is go out to my various team members who are all, of course, part of the gig economy, and find those who are hurting a little bit more than the others. And I have adjusted my work schedule to give them more work now, and to be able to help them continue. I feel like it's my big contribution to the economy overall, to help keep some people afloat. And I can do that because I've been very practical and saved money, and been really hard-headed about no debt.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic. So Pat, tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
It's, oddly enough, www.patriciamclinn.com is the number one place. My books are wide. I sell them at all the retailers, and I'm out there on social media. In fact, you should probably yell at me to get off social media. It's the Patricia McLinn. One of them, Patricia McLinn, Facebook, Patricia McLinn, Twitter, Patricia McLinn. I think it's Instagram has Patricia McLinn author. Pinterest is Patricia McLinn.
All right. Well, that sounds great.
We'll put all your links in the show notes. And
oh, bless your heart.
Yeah, we just enjoyed this. It's been so fun.
It's been great.
Thank you. It's wonderful talking to you guys.
So you can find all the show notes and all the links at wishidknownforwriters.com. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.